I'm writing this at 3:17 a.m. because I can't sleep anymore. Not because I'm scared of nightmares. Because I'm scared of waking up and finding proof that all of this actually happened. I haven't told anyone the full story. Not the police. Not my family. Not even my wife, back when I still spoke to her. Every time I tried, something stopped me. My throat would tighten. My mouth would dry out. My thoughts would scatter like I was being watched and corrected in real time. This is the first time I'm putting it all down in one place. If something happens to me, this is why. I was a courier. Not a delivery driver for packages and groceries. A licensed private courier for sensitive items. Medical samples. Legal evidence. Religious artifacts sometimes. The kind of work that doesn't show up on job boards and doesn't ask too many questions, as long as you don't ask any either. I'd been doing it for 11 years. No criminal record. Military background. Clean driving history. Psych evaluation every 2 years. I was reliable. Quiet. Replaceable. That's probably why they chose me. The call came on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my off days. I was in my kitchen, staring at a mug of coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. The phone rang once. Not twice. Once. Like it knew I'd answer. The number was blocked. A man spoke. Calm. American accent. Older but steady. He said my full legal name without asking if it was me. Then he said, "This delivery requires discretion beyond your previous experience." I almost hung up. That kind of line usually meant trouble, or a setup. But then he named 3 jobs I'd done over the past decade. Jobs that were never written down anywhere public. Jobs I never talked about. My hand tightened around the phone. He told me where to be. The time. What to bring. What not to bring. No phone. No GPS. No body cam. No questions. When I asked what the cargo was, he paused. Then he said, "A saint." I laughed. A short, confused sound. I thought he was testing me. He didn't laugh back. "We'll compensate you accordingly," he said. "Cash. No tax implications. No paperwork tied to your name." I asked how much. He said the number. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. It was more money than I made in a year. I said yes. I wish I hadn't said yes so quickly. The pickup location wasn't listed on any map I owned. An old monastery, 3 hours north, tucked into a stretch of forest that didn't have cell signal or road signs. The gravel driveway was freshly laid, but the building itself looked abandoned. Stone walls stained black by rain. Windows boarded from the inside. No crosses. No symbols. No flags. Just a bell tower with no bell. I arrived 10 minutes early. That's my habit. No one came out to greet me. I waited. At exactly 9 p.m., the front door opened by itself. No creak. No sound. Just open. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Not mold. Not dust. Something metallic and sweet underneath, like old blood cleaned too many times. There were lights on, but dim. Yellow. Flickering slightly, like they were struggling to stay lit. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. I didn't hear a lock engage. But when I turned around and tried the handle, it didn't move. Footsteps echoed somewhere deeper in the building. Slow. Measured. A man emerged from a side corridor. Elderly. Thin. Dressed in plain black clothes with no insignia. His eyes were watery and unfocused, like he wasn't really looking at me, more like through me. "You're late," he said. I'm early, I replied automatically. He shook his head once. Not for this. That should have been my cue to leave. Instead, I followed him. This saint was kept in a sub-basement. Not displayed. Not honored. Not even labeled. It was in a reinforced transport container, the kind used for biological hazards. Thick walls. Sealed seams. Air vents with filters so fine they hummed quietly when active. The container was cold to the touch. The old man handed me a clipboard. There is a contract, he said. You will sign without reading. I don't sign blind contracts, I said. He looked at me for a long time. Then he leaned closer and whispered, You already did. Years ago. This is just a reminder. My stomach dropped. I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, something inside the container moved. Just once. A soft, wet sound. Like a hand pressing against plastic from the inside. I froze. The old man watched my face carefully. It's important, he said, that you do not open it. Do not speak to it. Do not pray near it. And do not acknowledge it if it speaks first. I swallowed. Saints don't talk, I said. He smiled then. Not kindly. Neither do the dead, he replied. They loaded the container into my van themselves. No forklifts. No straps. Just 4 men lifting it like it weighed nothing, even though the manifest listed it at over 600 pounds. Before I left, the old man stopped me at the door. Your destination is not on any map, he said. If you arrive early, wait. If you arrive late, do not enter. And who am I delivering it to? I asked. For the first time, his voice shook. Lucifer, he said. I thought it was a joke. Then, from inside the container, something knocked back. Once. Slow. Deliberate. And I realized the knocking was coming from the inside. Not like someone trying to get out, but like someone trying to get my attention. I didn't look back when I drove away from the monastery. That wasn't bravery. It was instinct. The same instinct that tells you not to stare at an accident on the highway, not to check the dark corner of a room when you already feel something there. The van felt different the moment the container was loaded. Heavier. Not physically, my suspension handled it fine, but the air inside felt compressed, like the space had shrunk around me. The hum from the container's filtration system blended with the engine noise until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I kept my eyes on the road. The forest swallowed the monastery almost immediately. Within minutes, there was no sign I'd ever been there. No lights behind me. No silhouette in the mirrors. Just trees. And the sound. Tap. I stiffened. It came from the back of the van. Light. Fingertips, maybe? Testing. I told myself it was pressure shifting. Cargo settling. Anything except what my body already knew. The old man's words replayed in my head. Do not open it. Do not speak to it. Do not pray near it. Do not acknowledge it if it speaks first. That last part stuck with me. If it speaks first. That meant it could speak at all. The route they gave me wasn't printed. It was memorized. Highway for 40 miles. Exit at a rest stop that no longer showed up on modern GPS. 2-lane road into the mountains. Then, when the road narrowed to gravel, I was supposed to turn off my headlights and continue in the dark for exactly 6 minutes. They were very specific about the time. I checked my watch more than I checked the mirrors. At 10:43 p.m., the tapping came again. 3 taps this time. Slow. Evenly spaced. Like knocking. My throat tightened. No, I whispered before I could stop myself. The hum from the container grew louder. Not mechanically, emotionally. It felt like standing too close to a transformer. Like static crawling under my skin. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Not loud. Not gasping. Just present. I told myself it was airflow. Vents. My imagination filling gaps. That worked for about 30 seconds. Then something spoke. It didn't shout. It didn't whisper. It spoke like someone sitting calmly behind me, already certain I was listening. Driver, it said. I slammed the brakes. The van skidded to a stop on the empty road, gravel popping under the tires. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel to keep them from floating away. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. The silence stretched. Then, "You don't remember me." That voice wasn't monstrous. That was the worst part. It sounded human. Older. Tired. Male. Like a priest who had lost his faith but kept the job. My heart hammered in my ears. "I can smell your fear," it continued calmly. "It's sharp. New. You haven't carried it long." I squeezed my eyes shut. Do not acknowledge it if it speaks first. I started the engine. The container rattled as the van moved again, but the voice didn't stop. "They told you I was a saint," it said. "Did they tell you which one?" I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. "No," the voice answered itself. "They never do." I drove for another 20 minutes in absolute terror. The voice spoke occasionally. Not constantly. It didn't beg. It didn't threaten. It commented. On the road. On my breathing. On my posture. "You hunch when you're afraid," it said at one point. "That's from childhood. Making yourself smaller." I almost lost control of the van. "How do you know that?" I snapped, then immediately froze. I'd responded. The container went quiet. The hum stopped. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then the laughter started. Not loud. Not cruel. Just amused. "Ah," it said gently. "There you are." The temperature in the van dropped. My breath fogged the windshield even though the heater was running. "You broke the rule," it said. "That means you can hear me now. Properly." I felt sick. "I didn't mean to," I said. "Another mistake." It sighed. A long, patient sound. "No one ever does." I reached the gravel road just before midnight. I pulled over and shut off the headlights like they told me to. The darkness swallowed everything. I couldn't see the hood of the van. I couldn't see my hands. The only light was the faint red glow from the dashboard. 6 minutes, I muttered, checking my watch. "Do you know where you're going?" the voice asked. "Yes," I lied. It hummed thoughtfully. "They told you Lucifer," it said. "They like that name. It scares people into obedience." My stomach turned. "So it's not him?" I asked before thinking. A pause. Then, "It depends what you think Lucifer is." The road felt wrong under the tires. Too smooth in places. Too soft in others. Like I wasn't driving on gravel at all. I focused on the ticking of my watch. 4 minutes. "Do you remember the church in Ohio?" the voice asked suddenly. My blood went cold. I hadn't thought about that place in years. "How do you?" I started. "You were 12, it continued. "You went into the confession booth alone. You waited. No priest came. I could see it now. The dark wood. The smell of old incense. The feeling that someone was breathing on the other side of the screen. I was there, the voice said softly. My hands slipped on the wheel. You weren't supposed to hear me then, it added. But you did. The watch beeped. 6 minutes. I slammed the brakes. The van stopped. There was no road ahead of me anymore. Just a massive black doorway carved into the side of the mountain, stretching higher than my headlights could reach. And something inside the container whispered, almost fondly, "We're here." I sat there with my foot on the brake, engine idling, staring at the doorway. It wasn't carved the way humans carve things. There were no tool marks. No symmetry you could measure. The edges looked soft, like the mountain had been persuaded to open rather than forced. The darkness inside wasn't empty. It had depth. Layers. Like a tunnel that went down forever but refused to show you how far. My headlights didn't reach the back. They barely reached the front. "Do I drive in?" I asked. I didn't wait for permission. The question slipped out on its own, like my mouth was no longer fully mine. The container hummed again. Louder than before. "Yes," the voice said. Slowly. "They don't like sudden movements." "They?" My throat felt raw. "The ones who are still pretending this place is sealed." I eased my foot off the brake. The van rolled forward. The moment my front tires crossed the threshold, my ears popped. Not like altitude. Like pressure equalizing between two different realities. The dashboard lights flickered, then stabilized, dimmer than before. The air changed. It smelled old. Dry. Like paper that had been stored underground for centuries. Underneath that was something organic. Warm. Alive. The doorway sealed behind me without a sound. No crash. No rumble. Just gone. The tunnel sloped downward at a gentle angle. The walls weren't rock anymore. They were smooth, almost polished, and they reflected just enough light to show movement where there shouldn't have been any. I kept thinking I saw shapes sliding along the edges of the beams. Not shadows. Something else. Something that reacted when I looked directly at it. The radio crackled. I hadn't turned it on. A burst of static filled the cab, then voices bled through. Overlapping. Whispering in languages I didn't understand but somehow recognized. Latin. Old English. Something older than both. I shut it off. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. "You're doing well," the voice said from the container. "Most people don't make it this far without screaming." "I don't want to be here," I said. "No," it agreed. "You never did." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. I stopped the van without being told. The ceiling was so high I couldn't see it. The floor was flat, black stone marked with faint lines that intersected and looped back on themselves. Symbols, maybe? Or paths. In the center of the chamber stood a structure. Not a throne. Not an altar. A desk. Plain. Wooden. Old. Covered in stacks of paper, folders, ledgers bound in cracked leather. Candles burned on its surface, their flames perfectly still. Behind it sat a man. He looked ordinary. Middle-aged. Clean-shaven. Gray suit. White shirt. No tie. His hands were folded neatly in front of him. He could have been an accountant. A lawyer. Someone you'd pass in an office hallway and forget immediately. Except for his eyes. They were wrong. Too bright. Too focused. Like he was seeing every version of me at once and deciding which one he preferred. "You're late," he said. I checked my watch. I wasn't. "I apologize," I said anyway. The man smiled. "Everyone does," he replied. "Eventually." The container shifted in the back of the van. The voice inside grew quiet, almost respectful. "That's not Lucifer," it murmured. "That's a clerk." My heart sank. The man stood and walked around the desk, his shoes clicking softly against the stone. Each step echoed longer than it should have. "You can leave the vehicle," he said. "The cargo stays." "I was told to deliver it to," I began. "To Lucifer," he finished. "Yes. That's technically correct." He stopped a few feet away from me. "Lucifer is a title," he said, "not a person. And tonight that title is occupied elsewhere." My mouth felt dry. "So who are you?" I asked. He considered the question. "I keep records," he said. "I make sure agreements are honored. Debts are collected. Promises remembered." The container let out a low sound. Not a growl. Not a breath. Recognition. "I know you," the voice said softly. The clerk glanced toward the van. "Of course you do," he replied. "You've been very busy lately." I felt suddenly, deeply out of place. Like a child who had wandered into a meeting not meant for them. "Am I done?" I asked. "Can I go?" The clerk smiled again. "Not yet," he said. "We need to verify the condition of the saint." "No," I said quickly. "I was told not to open it." He nodded. "That instruction was for your protection," he said. "Not ours." He gestured toward the back of the van. "Open it." My legs wouldn't move. The voice inside the container spoke before I could respond. "Don't," it said. "If you open it here, they can see me." The clerk's smile faded. "That's enough," he said sharply. The air in the chamber tightened. The candles flickered for the first time. I felt pressure in my chest, like hands pushing inward. "Open the container." My vision blurred. I staggered toward the back of the van, every step feeling wrong, like I was walking against the current. My fingers closed around the latch. It was warm. Almost hot. "Driver," the voice said urgently, no calm left now. "Listen to me. You think you're delivering a saint." The latch clicked. "You're not," it said. I pulled the door open. Inside the container wasn't a body. It was a chair. Strapped to it was something that had once been human. And the moment I saw its face, the clerk screamed. The scream didn't come from the thing in the chair. It came from the clerk. A sharp, involuntary sound. The kind that escapes before the mind can stop it. He stumbled backward, knocking over a candle. Wax spilled across the desk, but the flame didn't go out. It crawled along the surface like it was alive. "No," the clerk whispered. "That's not possible." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing strapped to the chair was wrong in a way I still don't have words for. It was human-shaped, yes. Arms. Legs. A torso wrapped in restraints etched with symbols that hurt to look at for too long. Its skin was pale and thin, stretched tight over bone like it had forgotten how to be flesh. But the face was familiar. Too familiar. I recognized the scar above the left eyebrow immediately. I had that scar. Same shape. Same place. The thing opened its eyes. They were mine. "Hello?" it said gently. "You finally remember." My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the van to keep from collapsing. "That's not possible," I whispered. The saint smiled. "I said that too," it replied. The clerk recovered quickly. Too quickly. He straightened his suit, smoothed his hair, and composed himself like a man embarrassed by a brief lapse in professionalism. "This delivery is invalid," he said sharply. "This is not what was agreed upon." The saint laughed softly. "You don't get to decide that," it said. "Not anymore." The restraints tightened on their own. Metal groaned. Symbols glowed faintly, like dying embers. "Driver," the saint said, eyes never leaving mine. "Look closely. Look at my hands." I didn't want to. I did anyway. The hands were scarred. Burn marks. Cuts. Old injuries. My injuries. Memories flooded back, uninvited. A car accident when I was 17. A broken finger from basic training. A burn on my palm from a church candle I dropped as a child. I screamed. "No," I said. "This is a trick." "It was," the saint agreed. "At first." The clerk raised his voice. "Enough. You were contained for a reason." "Yes," the saint said calmly. "Because I wouldn't stop confessing." The word hit me like a punch. Confessing. The booth in Ohio. The breathing. The voice on the other side of the screen. "You told me everything," the saint said softly. "Every thought you were too ashamed to say out loud. Every doubt. Every moment you felt something watching you and chose to ignore it." My head throbbed. "I was 12, I whispered. "And very honest," the saint replied. The chamber trembled. Not violently. Just enough to remind us it was listening. The clerk took a step toward the container. "You are not a saint," he said. "You are a liability." The saint tilted its head. "A saint is just a witness who survives," it said. "I survived longer than most." "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely working. The saint looked at me with something like pity. "I'm the part of you that didn't stop listening." The words made my skin crawl. "You heard something that night," it continued. "Something that wasn't supposed to speak to children. It needed a mouth. A memory. A shape." I shook my head. "No. I'm me." "Yes," it said. "You are. That's the problem." The clerk slammed his hand down on the desk. "This is a breach," he shouted. "You are to be delivered intact." "Silent." "I am intact," the saint said. "Silent is negotiable." The lights dimmed. The shadows along the walls stretched, peeling themselves free like stains lifting from stone. Shapes emerged. Tall. Thin. Watching. The clerk swallowed. "You've been talking again," he said. The saint smiled wider. "They always listen eventually." I felt something stir in my chest. A pressure I'd felt my whole life but never understood. The feeling of being observed, judged, not by God, not by demons, but by something that wanted truth more than obedience. "What happens now?" I asked. The saint looked at me. "No," it said. "You decide which one of us stays." The clerk's eyes snapped to me. "What?" I whispered. "You signed the contract," the saint said. "You always do. Every time they need a courier. Every time they need a replacement." My ears rang. "No," the clerk said quickly. "That's not how it works." The saint laughed. "Read the fine print," it replied. "Oh, right. You don't let him." The chamber shook harder now. Cracks formed in the stone floor, glowing faintly from beneath. The clerk backed away. "You can't leave," he said to the saint. "You know what happens if you do." The saint's gaze never left mine. "I do," it said. "That's why I brought him." The restraints around the saint loosened. Metal fell away. The container began to split along its seams. And somewhere deep beneath us, something massive shifted. like a door opening that had been sealed for a very long time. The chamber went still. Not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that presses against your ears until you're aware of your own pulse. The shadows froze where they stood, stretched halfway out of the walls like they'd been caught mid-step. The restraints finished falling away from the saint's body and clattered onto the stone floor. The sound echoed longer than it should have, spiraling outward, folding back on itself. The saint stood up. It moved carefully, like someone relearning how gravity worked. Its joints cracked softly. Not painfully. Thoughtfully. The clerk didn't move. Neither did I. Up close, the saint looked even more like me. Same height. Same build. Even the same nervous habit of rolling the shoulders forward slightly, as if bracing for impact. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded small in that place. "Why me?" The saint looked at its hands again, flexing the fingers. "Because you listened," it said. "And you didn't stop." The clerk finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "He was a child," he said. "You exploited that." The saint turned its head slowly toward him. "No," it replied. "I confessed to him." The word landed heavy. Confessed. "You think confession is a one-way act," the saint continued. "That someone speaks and something else listens. But that's not how it works. Confession creates a bond." I felt that pressure in my chest tighten. "That night in the booth," the saint said to me, "you weren't alone. And you weren't talking to God." The memory sharpened. The way the darkness behind the screen felt crowded. The sense that the silence was waiting for me. How the voice hadn't asked me what I'd done, only told me to continue. "You told me things no one else ever did," the saint said. "Thoughts. Curiosities. Fears. You gave them shape by saying them out loud." The clerk clenched his jaw. "That is precisely why you were contained," he said. "You blur boundaries." "Boundaries are paperwork," the saint replied. "And paperwork can be rewritten." The saint stepped out of the container completely. Nothing stopped it. No alarms. No barriers. No invisible force. That terrified me more than anything else so far. "You were never meant to be a courier," the saint said, turning back to me. "You were meant to be a vessel." I shook my head. "I have a life," I said. "I had a wife. A job. I made choices." "Yes," it agreed. "You chose silence. Over and over again." The chamber pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. "Do you know why they call me a saint?" it asked. I didn't answer. "Because I kept the record," it said. "Not sins. Not crimes. Truths. The things people say when they think no one important is listening." The clerk took a step back. "This is deviation," he said. "We cannot allow you to leave with him." The saint smiled. "I'm not leaving with him," it said. I felt cold. "I'm leaving as him." The saint approached me. Up close, I could see subtle differences. Scars that hadn't happened yet. Lines of exhaustion deeper than mine. Eyes that had seen too much listening and not enough forgetting. "I was bound because I remembered," it said quietly. "You were free because you forgot." It placed a hand over its chest. "Every time you felt watched," it continued, "that was me. Every time you woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason. Every time silence made you uncomfortable." My throat closed. "You carried me," it said. "Without knowing." The clerk raised his voice, losing control now. "If this proceeds, there will be consequences," he warned. "Systems will destabilize." The saint glanced at him. "They already have," it said. The shadows along the walls receded, melting back into stone like they'd never been there. Somewhere far above us, something heavy closed. Not slammed, sealed. "What happens to me?" I asked. The saint's expression softened. "You rest," it said. For the first time. It reached out and touched my forehead. The contact was gentle, warm. Memories poured in, not mine. Other confession booths. Other children. Adults. Soldiers. Prisoners. Priests. Voices shaking in the dark, relieved to finally be heard. I felt the weight of them. The accumulation. The burden of being the thing people told the truth to when they had nowhere else to put it. I collapsed to my knees. The saint staggered slightly, breathing harder now. "You're taking it back," I whispered. "Yes," it said. "I'm returning what was borrowed." The clerk watched in horror. "This is unauthorized transfer," he said. "You will destabilize the ledger." The saint looked at him one last time. "Then update it," it replied. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the stone floor. The container was empty. The saint was gone. So was the clerk. The desk remained covered in paperwork, but the pages were blank now. Every ledger empty. Every folder wiped clean. The chamber felt hollow. Like a church after everyone has left. A door opened somewhere behind me. A normal door. Plain. Wooden. Light spilled through. I stood on shaking legs and walked toward it. No one stopped me. I woke up in my van, parked on the side of a familiar highway. Morning light filtered through the windshield. My watch said 6:12 a.m. The container was gone. There were no tire tracks leading anywhere unusual. No doorway in the mountain. Just asphalt, trees, and the sound of passing cars. I drove home. I showered. I went to work. Life continued. But something was missing. The pressure in my chest was gone. The feeling of being watched had faded. And for the first time I could remember. Silence didn't feel crowded anymore. At first I thought I'd been cured. That's the word my mind reached for, even though I didn't believe in it. The silence inside my head felt clean. Empty in a good way. Like a room after movers leave, when you can finally hear your own footsteps again. I slept through the night. Number 3 a.m. waking. No sense of eyes in the dark. No pressure in my chest. For 3 days, I almost convinced myself it was over. That was my mistake. It started small. On the 4th morning, I woke up before my alarm. Not abruptly. Not panicked. Just awake. The digital clock read 6:13 a.m. I frowned. I never woke up at 6:13. My alarm was set for 6:30. Always had been. I brushed it off. Coincidence. In the bathroom mirror, something felt off. My reflection lagged, not visibly, not like in movies. Just enough that my brain noticed before my eyes did. When I smiled, I had the uneasy sense the reflection was deciding whether to smile back. I turned away quickly. At work, things were worse. I was assigned a routine medical courier run. Hospital to lab. Temperature-controlled container. Nothing unusual. Except the manifest listed one item. No description. Just a blank line where the contents should be. I asked dispatch about it. They said, "About time you noticed." I laughed nervously, waiting for the joke to land. It didn't. The woman on the other end sounded tired. Older than I remembered. "You've been doing this a long time," she said. "You should know better than to ask." The line went dead. The container they gave me was identical to the one from the monastery. Same size. Same material. Same faint hum. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was mass-produced. Standard issue. Lots of companies use similar designs. Still, my hands shook when I touched it. It was warm. Not room temperature. Body temperature. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I drove. I delivered. I signed nothing. I read nothing. No voices. No knocking. No breathing. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like waiting for a cough that never comes. That night, I dreamed of paperwork. Endless rows of desks stretching into darkness. Ledgers stacked floor to ceiling. Names written, crossed out, written again in different handwriting. My name appeared over and over. Sometimes followed by dates. Sometimes followed by question marks. Sometimes by nothing at all. I woke up sweating. The clock read 3:17 a.m. My chest tightened. So much for being cured. The next day, I noticed people staring. Not obviously. Not like suspicion. More like recognition. A cashier paused when she handed me my receipt, her eyes lingering on my face a second too long. A man on the bus leaned closer than necessary and whispered, "Thank you," before getting off at the next stop. I didn't know him. I was sure of that. By the end of the week, the whispers started. Always quiet. Always just behind me. Never when I turned around. At first, I thought they were phone calls bleeding through walls. Conversations from other apartments. The city settling at night. But the words were wrong. They weren't conversations. They were admissions. I didn't mean to. I thought it would stop. I was so angry. I still think about it. I pressed my hands over my ears. The sound came from inside my skull. I went to a doctor. Then another. They ran tests. Blood work. Scans. Psychological evaluations. Everything came back normal. One doctor, a neurologist with tired eyes, hesitated before leaving the room. "Do you work in customer service?" he asked. "No," I said. He nodded slowly. "Just curious," he said. "You have the same stress markers I see in priests and emergency dispatchers." That night, the whispers got louder. I sat on my couch, lights on, TV muted, listening to voices confessing things they would never say out loud. Some were nearby. Some were far away. Distance didn't seem to matter anymore. I curled forward, elbows on my knees, trying to make myself smaller. That's when I realized something worse. I wasn't just hearing them. I understood them. Fully. Not the words, the meaning behind them. The weight. The intention. The truth people didn't even admit to themselves. I gagged and ran to the bathroom. In the mirror, my eyes looked deeper. Not brighter. Heavier. Like shelves being filled. At 11:48 p.m., my phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. On the fourth ring, the whispers stopped. Complete silence. I answered. The clerk's voice came through the speaker. Calm. Professional. Disappointed. "You left your position," he said. "And now you're filling it." My blood ran cold. "I didn't agree to anything," I said. A pause. "Yes," he replied. "You did. Years ago." Images flashed through my mind, contracts I hadn't read, signatures I didn't remember making, moments of fear where I'd said yes just to make something stop watching me. "You're not a saint," the clerk continued. "You're something much less stable." "What do you want?" I whispered. "To correct the error," he said. Behind his voice, I heard a sound. Paper turning. And then, a knock. Not on the phone. On my front door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. From the hallway outside my apartment. I didn't move. The knocking came again. 3 taps. Same rhythm. Same patience. Not aggressive. Not urgent. Certain. I stayed on the couch, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sound echo through my apartment like it belonged there. You should answer, the clerk said calmly. They've already waited long enough. Who is they? I whispered. A soft sound came through the line. Not quite a laugh. Former clients, he said. Unfinished accounts. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds the silence was so complete I could hear the blood moving in my ears. Then a voice spoke from the hallway. Not raised. Not angry. Polite. Daniel? It said. My stomach dropped. No one used my first name like that. Not strangers. Not anymore. Yes, another voice added. We know you're home. The clerk hung up. The phone went dead in my hand. I stood slowly, every nerve in my body screaming not to get closer to the door. The peepholes showed the hallway distorted into a narrow fisheye view. 2 people stood outside. A man and a woman. Both middle-aged. Both dressed plainly. Office casual. The kind of people you'd see waiting for an elevator or standing in line at a pharmacy. The man held a folder. The woman clasped her hands in front of her like she was waiting for a meeting to start. They weren't smiling. They weren't frowning either. They looked relieved. I cracked the door open an inch, the chain still on. Yes? I said. The man looked down at the folder, then back up at me. Daniel Mercer, he said. We're here for our confession. The words sucked the air from my lungs. I think you have the wrong apartment, I said. The woman tilted her head slightly. No, she said. We followed the silence. It led us to you. Something behind them moved. Not in the hallway, through it. Like pressure passing through water. I'm not a priest, I said. You need to leave. The man nodded sympathetically. That's what the last one said too. The chain rattled. Not because they touched it. Because the door frame flexed inward slightly, like the building itself was leaning closer to listen. I can't help you, I said louder now. The woman's eyes softened. We know, she said. That's why this hurts. She stepped forward. The hallway lights flickered. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I hit him, she said. Not hard. I didn't think it would. I slammed the door shut. Locked it. Pressed my back against it. The whisper continued. Through the wood. Through the walls. I didn't call for help because I thought he'd wake up. My chest burned. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, hands over my ears. The voice didn't get quieter. It got clearer. Every word sharp and precise, carrying the full weight of what she meant but never said out loud. I screamed. The whisper stopped. So did everything else. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. No voices. No knocking. The hallway was empty when I checked. No neighbors. No footsteps. No sign anyone had ever been there. But something had been left behind. The folder. It sat neatly on my welcome mat. My name was typed on the front. I brought it inside with shaking hands and set it on the table. Inside were pages. Transcripts. Confessions. Hundreds of them. Different handwriting. Different dates. Different locations. All addressed to the same recipient. Listener, active. At the bottom of the last page was a note, written in ink so dark it almost looked wet. You don't get to stop listening just because you're tired. That night the city changed. Not physically. Emotionally. Every sound carried intention. Car horns blared with rage. Sirens wailed with guilt. Laughter cracked with something brittle underneath. I couldn't filter it anymore. Every human sound came layered with truth. I went days without sleep. People started finding me. Not online. Not through addresses. They followed the quiet spaces where their thoughts got loud. My apartment hallway filled at night. They waited patiently. They knocked. They whispered. They cried. I stopped answering. That was when the dreams stopped being dreams. I stood in the chamber again. The desk was back. The clerk sat behind it, flipping through a ledger now thick with pages. He didn't look up. "You're burning out," he said. "I never agreed to this," I said. He finally met my eyes. "You agreed to be heard," he replied. "This is the consequence." "What happens if I refuse?" I asked. The clerk closed the ledger. The sound echoed like a door slamming. "Then the confessions don't stop," he said. "They just don't survive the telling." The floor beneath us cracked. I heard screaming, distant, overlapping, breaking into static. My heart pounded. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The clerk stood. He gestured to the chair behind the desk. The same one from the container. Reinforced. Waiting. "I want you to sit," he said. "And I want you to listen." I didn't sit. That's the first thing you need to know. I stood there in the chamber, staring at the chair behind the desk, and every instinct in my body screamed that if I sat down, I would never stand up again. The chair wasn't ornate. That was the problem. It wasn't a throne or an instrument of torture. It looked practical, adjustable, reinforced in places that suggested someone had tested it, refined it, learned exactly where a human body gives out over time. Leather straps hung loosely at the sides. Worn. Broken in. The clerk waited. He wasn't rushing me. He never did. "You're already doing the work," he said. "You might as well do it properly." "I didn't ask for this," I said. "No one ever does," he replied. "They ask to be heard. The rest follows naturally." The chamber around us felt closer now. The walls leaned inward just enough to make breathing feel like effort. "I can't stop it," I said. "I hear everything." The clerk nodded. "Yes. That's why you're failing." He stepped aside, revealing something behind the desk I hadn't noticed before. A shelf. On it were objects. Personal ones. A cracked rosary. A child's sneaker, sole worn thin. A wedding ring bent out of shape. A dog-eared notebook soaked through with something dark. "Previous listeners," the clerk said. "They all thought endurance was enough." My throat tightened. "What happened to them?" He smiled thinly. "They listened alone." The voices came back while he spoke. Not whispers this time. Full volume. Layered. Dozens at once. People confessing to no one in particular, trusting the quiet to hold their worst thoughts. I staggered, clutching my head. "I can't do this," I gasped. "You already are," the clerk said. "You're just refusing the structure." The desk drawers slid open by themselves. Inside were files, each labeled with a name. Some crossed out. Some circled. One sat on top. Mine. Mercer Daniel, active/unsealed. My knees buckled. "You don't need faith," the clerk continued. "You don't need belief. You just need containment." The chair creaked softly, like it had shifted its weight in anticipation. "Sit," he said again. The voices surged. A man sobbing about a hit and run. A woman laughing while admitting she never loved her child. A teenager whispering plans that made my stomach turn. The weight of them pressed me down. I realized then that the saint hadn't taken the burden away. He'd taught me how heavy it really was. "I'll break," I said. The clerk tilted his head. "Yes," he said. "Eventually." That word echoed. Eventually. "What happens then?" I asked. He considered me carefully. "When you break," he said, "we find someone else who listened too long as a child." My blood ran cold. I thought of confession booths, of bedrooms at night, of children lying awake, hearing something answer back. "You're recruiting," I whispered. "We prefer continuity," he replied. The chair's straps twitched. I took a step backward. The floor behind me wasn't there anymore. Just darkness. Depthless. Waiting. "You can walk away," the clerk said. "But you'll take the noise with you. It will spread. People will die under the weight of their own truths." My chest burned. "And if I sit?" I asked. The clerk's voice softened. "Then the world stays quiet," he said. "And you carry it." Something shifted inside me then. Not courage. Anger. A slow, exhausted anger that had been building since I was 12 years old, and no one had explained what I'd heard in that booth. "You said the last ones listened alone," I said. "Yes." I laughed weakly. "Then that's why they failed." The clerk's smile faded. "I won't be alone," I said. "And I won't be contained like that." The voices wavered. Confused. For the first time, they weren't sure where to go. "You misunderstand," the clerk said sharply. "There is no alternative." I closed my eyes. And spoke. Not to the clerk. Not to the chamber. To the voices. All of them. "I hear you," I said. The effect was immediate. The noise collapsed inward, like a crowd leaning toward a single point. "I hear you," I repeated. "But you don't belong to me." The chamber shook violently now. The desk cracked. Papers flew into the air, pages filling themselves with writing as they spun. The clerk shouted something I didn't understand. The chair screamed. Yes, screamed, metal shrieking as its frame twisted, measurements failing, assumptions breaking. I felt something tear loose in my chest. Not pain. Connection. I opened my eyes. The chamber was emptying. Not of people. Of structure. Walls dissolving into shadow. The desk splintering into meaningless wood. The clerk backed away, eyes wide for the first time. "What have you done?" he demanded. I looked at him. "I stopped listening alone," I said. I woke up in my apartment. Morning light. No knocking. No whispers. My phone lay on the floor, screen shattered. For 3 blessed seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard it. Not voices. Breathing. Behind me. Close. Familiar. "I told you," a voice said gently, right by my ear. The saint's voice. "You don't get to stop," he whispered. "You just changed who's listening with you." I didn't turn around. I already knew what I'd see. The breathing behind me wasn't threatening. It wasn't urgent. It was steady, familiar, like someone standing in a doorway waiting for you to finish a thought. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I never left," the saint replied. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, sunlight cutting pale lines across the floor. Everything looked normal. Too normal. My apartment smelled like dust and old coffee. The city hummed outside, indifferent. But the air felt occupied. "You broke the system," the saint said softly. "That has consequences." "I didn't agree to replace it," I said. "You didn't replace it," he corrected. "You redistributed it." I finally turned. He stood near the wall, half in shadow. Still wearing my face, but older now. More worn. Like time had finally caught up to him. "You let them hear each other," he continued. "Do you know what that does to a confession?" I swallowed. "No," I said. He smiled sadly. "It turns it into accusation." The first incident happened that afternoon. I was at a diner 2 blocks from my apartment, nursing a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The place was nearly empty. A waitress wiped the counter in slow, tired circles. A man sat alone in a booth, staring into his hands. I felt it before I heard it. Pressure. Not inward, outward. The man in the booth looked up suddenly. His eyes locked onto the waitress. "You know," he said loudly, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to hit her." The waitress froze. "I just lost my temper," he continued. "And then I told myself it wasn't my fault." The air in the diner went dead quiet. "I told myself she made me do it." The waitress stared at him, face draining of color. "I told myself you'd understand," he said. She dropped the rag. The saint's voice whispered in my ear. "They're not whispering anymore." I left before anyone noticed me shaking. By evening, it was everywhere. A woman screaming her infidelity into a bus full of commuters. A teenager sobbing in a park, admitting plans he hadn't carried out yet. A man collapsing in a grocery store aisle, shouting apologies to a dead brother. Confessions weren't seeking silence anymore. They were seeking witnesses. "I didn't mean this," I said to the saint. "I was trying to stop it." "You stopped containment," he replied. "Truth doesn't stay quiet when it's free." Sirens wailed in the distance. More than usual. "People are going to hurt each other," I said. "Yes," he said. "And some will stop pretending." That night, the clerk called again. This time, I answered immediately. "You've caused a cascade failure," he said, no calm left now. "Do you have any idea how many structures depended on singular listeners?" "Then build better ones," I snapped. A pause. "That's not how this works," he said quietly. "Listeners were never meant to meet." The line clicked. Then my phone buzzed. A message. "Unknown contact. We can hear you too." My blood ran cold. They started coming. Not to my door. To each other. People who had never met before were drawn together by shared guilt, shared silence, shared things that should have stayed buried. Groups formed. Not support groups. Something darker. They met in basements. Churches after hours. Abandoned buildings where confession used to feel safe. They didn't absolve each other. They judged. They punished. The saint watched it unfold with something like grief. "This is why they isolated us," he said. "Listeners weren't meant to compare notes." "Can we stop it?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time. "Yes," he said. Hope flared in my chest. "How?" I asked. He stepped closer. "Soften the truth again," he said. "Put it back into one mouth." I understood immediately. "No," I said. "Then it will choose someone else," he replied. Outside I heard shouting. Angry. Unified. "They're forming hierarchies," I whispered. "Yes," he said. "Confession always does." I backed away. "I won't do it," I said. The saint's expression hardened. You already are, he said. You just don't know it yet. That night, I dreamed of the chair again. But this time, it wasn't empty. People sat in it, one after another. Not bound, not restrained, voluntary. They leaned forward and spoke. And every time they did, their faces changed. A little closer to mine. I woke up screaming. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong. My eyes were deeper again. Shelves filling. I'm writing this now because something happened an hour ago. Something final. Someone knocked on my door. Not 3 times. Once. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The saint stood on the other side. And behind him, hundreds of people. Silent. Waiting. All of them looking at my door like it was a confession booth. The saint met my eyes through the peephole. And mouthed 4 words I can't forget. They chose you. I didn't open the door. I don't know if that mattered. The hallway was silent. Too silent for that many people. No breathing. No shuffling. No impatience. Just a presence so dense it felt like pressure against my skin. I stepped away from the peephole. Sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The saint's voice came through the door without raising its volume. They won't force their way in, he said gently. Confession doesn't work like that. What happens if I don't answer? I asked. A pause. Then they'll wait, he replied. Or they'll find someone weaker. My stomach twisted. I won't do this, I said again, though my voice lacked conviction now. I won't become whatever you are. You already are, he said. You just haven't accepted the shape yet. Something shifted outside. Not footsteps. Alignment. Like a crowd settling into agreement. I heard crying. Not loud. Contained. Reverent. I don't remember standing up. One moment I was on the floor, the next my hand was on the doorknob. It felt warm. Alive. The moment I opened the door, the hallway changed. It stretched longer than it should have. Lights dimmed into a soft amber glow, like candlelight filtered through smoke. The people standing there weren't strangers anymore. I recognized them. Not by name. By weight. Each one carried something unfinished. Something that had shaped their posture, their breathing, their eyes. The saint stood at the front. He stepped aside. They parted from me. No one touched me. They didn't need to. I walked forward. The room they led me to used to be a laundry room. Cinder block walls. Cracked tile. A drain in the center of the floor. Someone had cleaned it. Carefully. Chairs were arranged in a circle. In the middle. Not a throne. Not the old chair. Just an ordinary metal folding chair. Waiting. You don't have to sit, the saint said quietly behind me. I laughed. A dry, broken sound. Yes, I said. I do. I sat. The moment I did, the room exhaled. People leaned forward. Not eagerly. Gratefully. The first voice spoke. I need to say something, a man whispered. And I understood, fully, completely, what he meant before he finished the sentence. That was when I knew. This wasn't about hearing words. It was about holding what they couldn't carry anymore. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time doesn't behave well when truth accumulates. I listened. I didn't judge. I didn't absolve. I held. When one person finished, another began. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they smiled in relief. Sometimes they broke down when they realized what they'd been avoiding all their lives. With every confession, something settled deeper into me. The shelves filled. At some point, the saint left. I felt it like the loss of a limb. Not pain. Absence. By the time I noticed he was gone, I understood why. This wasn't a shared burden anymore. It was stable now. Contained. Me. People started leaving before dawn. Quietly. Orderly. They thanked me without words. By the time the sun rose, I was alone in the room. Sitting. Listening. Even in the silence. Weeks passed. Then months. I stopped going home. People found me anyway. Not just here. Everywhere. Confession booths reopened in churches that hadn't used them in decades. Support lines rerouted calls to numbers that didn't exist on paper. I started receiving letters with no return addresses. Emails sent to inboxes I never created. I answered them all. I listened. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of shelves. They're almost full now. That's the part no one warned me about. Truth doesn't end. It accumulates. The clerk visited once. He stood in the doorway, older somehow. More tired. You stabilized it, he said. For now, I replied. He nodded. Someone will replace you, he said. I smiled faintly. Yes, I said. Eventually. He hesitated. Do you regret it? I thought of the silence I'd felt after the monastery. Of how good it had felt not to be watched. No, I said. He left. I'm writing this because I can feel the edges fraying again. The shelves are bowing. The listening is changing. People aren't confessing quietly anymore. They're starting to look for something else when they speak. Permission. Direction. Judgment. That's when listeners become gods. Or devils. Or something worse. I won't let that happen. If you're reading this and something in you feels lighter. If you've ever spoken into the dark and felt something answer. If silence makes you uneasy, like it's waiting. Be careful. Don't keep listening. And whatever you do, don't answer back. Because I can hear you now. And I'm very, very full.